Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ben here, and today I'm going to be doing a video that I've been looking forward to doing for a while now. And the video is going to be talking about some of the best teams to never win a championship in the NBA. And so to start off, I'm just going to do a few clarifying parameters for how I chose these teams and what exactly I mean by best teams to never win a championship. So I don't just flat out mean teams that have never won a championship, because, if you're talking, let's say, about the Phoenix Suns, the team in 1960 is obviously a lot different than the team that didn't win in the 1990s. So I'll be talking about a specific team's era. I have 10 eras that I've selected for a team, for different teams, and I'll be going over them, talking about them, talking about the success that they did have, how close they came to a championship, and the specific year when they had the best chance to win it all. And along with that, I think that this video needed to be made because I think that there's just this assumption in the NBA that if you don't win a championship, it was all for naught and the whole time that you were building that team was a waste. But I don't necessarily think that. I think that it can be very worthwhile to have a team that even just goes to the finals and doesn't win. I think that there's a negative connotation with not winning a championship, and there should be, because teams should want to win championships, but there's a connotation of failure if you don't win a championship a lot, which I don't think is true. I think that sometimes for certain teams, just making the playoffs can be a tremendous success, and it shouldn't be taken lightly that they were able to do that. So let's get into it. Let's start talking about some of these teams and eras and how the teams that I deem were really, really close but were never able to win it. And also another guideline too is I'm not going to include teams that did win a championship during their era. So for instance, I'm not going to include the 2015-16 Warriors that didn't win the championship, because they won championships on either side of that, so I don't really count that as a team that didn't win. Also, another good example would be, let's say, the 1984 Lakers that lost in Game 7 of the finals. I'm not going to count that team because they won it in 82, they won it in 85 with the exact same core, basically. So I'm not going to count that. So things along those lines. I'm not going to count the 1971 Lakers because they won it in 72 with the exact same core, so I don't really feel like that should count. So yeah, so let's get into it. The first team I have on here is the Oklahoma City Thunder, and during the era of 2009 to 2016. So between the 2009-10 season and the 2015-16 season, the Thunder, except for the year that Kevin Durant missed the entire season, always had 50 wins and always were right in the thick of it as far as the playoff race. This team was comprised for half of this span of a core that consisted of Serge Ibaka, James Harden, Russell Westbrook, and Kevin Durant, with some of that including Jeff Green as well, the first 2 years of this stint. And there's just a super talented core. They had defense in Ibaka, and they had offensive prowess in Durant, Russ, and Harden, and Jeff Green for the little time he was there. And they were just an overall really good team. I liked them a lot with their young core. I thought that they were very impressive and had a really bright future. But of course, they traded away James Harden and Jeff Green and eventually Ibaka as well. And Kevin Durant left in 2016, so this team's chance for a deep run went out the window after that. I'd say the year that they had the best chance of winning it all was 2011-12 when they made the finals against the Heat. They didn't win it all. They lost in 5, but they just had been playing great that year. And they were actually the favorites to win that championship, and the Heat overcame the odds and beat them. But this Thunder team, I feel like if they would have stayed together, would have just kept plugging away and making finals and maybe winning it eventually. They made the Western Conference Finals in 2011, the Finals in 2012, second round in 2013, Western Conference Finals in 14, missed the playoffs in 15, and Western Conference Finals again in 16. So that's pretty impressive. So moving on from them, the next team I have on here is the Utah Jazz, between 1988 and the 1999 to 2000 season. So 1988 through 2000. This was right in the heart of the primes of John Stockton and Karl Malone, and they were getting to the playoffs every year at this point and winning 50 games every single season. They made the Western Conference Finals, I think, 3 or 4 times besides the years that they actually made it to the finals in 97 and 98. So yeah, I think that this is probably the best dynasty to not, or the best era of basketball to not make it and win a championship eventually. They just had the great duo for for 2 decades, and they were just never able to get over the hump of winning a championship, which is unfortunate, but just the way it goes sometimes, and nothing can really be done about it in certain cases. I'd say their best chance of winning it all was probably 1997 to 98 when they won 62 games. They got to the NBA Finals and lost to the Bulls in 6 games. The Bulls were a bit more worn down at this point, and I feel like the Jazz would have had a better chance of overcoming them. They had already faced them, so they were more familiar with their opponents, and they should have been more thirsty for a title because they had just lost to the Bulls the previous season. But they didn't. They lost, and that is obviously why they're on this list now. The next team I have on here is the Seattle Supersonics, who became the Oklahoma City Thunder eventually. But at this point, we're still the Sonics, and this dynasty was lasting from 1992 through 1998, the prime of Gary Payton and Shawn Kemp's careers. They were a 50-plus win team for all of these seasons. They were the 1 seed twice. They had both a 64-win season and also a 63-win season. In 1993 to 94, they were the top seed with 63 wins, but actually lost in the first ever 8-1 seed upset to the Denver Nuggets. So that was a really blown opportunity. If they could have just won that series, they might have even gone on to the NBA Finals. I'd say the year that gave them the best chance of getting to the finals was definitely, let's see here. I lost my train of thought, but their best chance of winning was in 1995 to 96. They won 64 games. They made it to the finals, and they lost to the Bulls in 6 games, which is seemingly a common occurrence now of these teams I have on this list. After 1998, they fell off a bit. They were more like a 6, 7, and 8 seed after that. Shawn Kemp got traded away and started declining. And after 1998, I think Gary Payton lost a step. He was still a really good player, but he went more from like a superstar, top 3 guard in the league to more just like an all-star level. So they weren't like a title contender anymore after 1998. But for those 6 seasons, they were right there, and at any year you were kind of thinking that, oh, maybe it's the Sonics' turn to go ahead and get to the finals. So yeah, a very impressive team, and a really fun team to watch with Gary Payton with the great offense and tremendous defense, and Shawn Kemp, I should say, not Sean Payton, with the excellent dunks and highlight reel explosive plays. They were really the Chris Paul and Blake Griffin of the 1990s, I think, but I might make a separate video on that later. Alright, so the next team I have on here is the New Jersey Nets from 2001 to 2007. Now, this is an interesting one that I feel like I have to explain myself a bit more on. So the Nets made the finals in 2002 and 2003. So that's the years that people think of mostly for them. But I also consider some of these other years good because they got to the second round a few times as well. And after in the midst of 2004, they actually traded for Vince Carter. So I think at that point they became much more of a threat in the overall scheme of things. They had Jason Kidd, Vince Carter, and Richard Jefferson all in their primes, which I feel like should have been good enough to get to the finals multiple years in a row. But they choked and had a combination of injuries and stuff like that, and just got overwhelmed by other teams. But I think that they had all the talent in the world to go ahead and win a championship at that point. You might want to say that their best chance to win a title was in 2002 or 2003, but I feel like those Nets teams were actually slightly less talented than the ones with Vince Carter. But Either way you look at it, I feel like in this window between 2001 and 2007, they could have been poised to not make 2 finals trips, but make 4 or 5, just in my opinion. But then after 2007, Jason Kidd got traded away in the season following that, and so then it all kind of fell apart, and they really started to go down the toilet bowl at that point. But they were a hyper-talented team, and they had a good shot of winning it all if they would have just stayed healthy more often and not choked in the clutch. All right, let's see here. The 5th team I have on here is the Sacramento Kings between the year 2000 and 2004. So in all these seasons, the Kings won 50-plus games. In the 2002 to 2003 season, they were the 1 seed with 62 wins, I believe, or 61. And the season prior, they were the 2 seed with 59 wins. And on, let's see, in 03-04, they had around 53 wins. And in 2000 to 2001, I think they had around the same, like 53 to 55 wins. They were the 3 seed or higher in each of these 4 seasons. So I think that if you're a 3 seed, you got a pretty good shot of making it to the finals and winning it all. I'd say that the season where they had the best chance was 2002 to 2003 when they were the 1 seed. They got to Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals against the Lakers, and I think if not for some league tampering and refs that were susceptible to cheating, then we would have seen these Kings as a world champion instead of the Lakers for a 3rd straight time. Or excuse me, this is the 01 to 02 season that they were doing all this. So in 02 to 03 is when they had the great record again, but Chris Webber got injured in the playoffs, so that cut their playoff run short. So 01 to 02 is when the actual correct year is, when they should have won the championship, I think. And then after Webber got injured, the team just wasn't the same. In 03 to 04, they were still good, around 55 wins, and they got to the playoffs as the 4 seed. But they ran into the Timberwolves, and the injured Chris Webber couldn't really handle Kevin Garnett all that well, and so they lost. In the following season, they traded away Chris Webber and weren't really the same team anymore. Looking ahead, the next team I have on here is the Phoenix Suns between 2004 to 2010. This is the first ever 7 seconds or less offense, sort of the pace and space NBA that totally overwhelms the NBA today. It was led by Steve Nash, Shawn Marion, Amari Stoudemire. Those are the 3 main guys. And they, let's see here, in 2004 to 5, they had the best record in the league at 62 and 20. And then, let's see here, 05 to 06, they won 54 games. 06 to 07, I think they won around 58 games. They made the Western Conference Finals in 05 and 07. In 06, they lost in the 2nd round. In 08, they lost in the 1st round. 2009, they missed the playoffs but won about 47 games. And then 2010, they made the Western Conference Finals again. And there was a lot of shuffling of pieces. Shawn Marion got traded partway through this whole span of things, and Shaq came in for a little while. But by 2010, it was pretty well established. It was Nash and Amari's team, and that's how it had been earlier on too, except the Matrix had played a bigger role, Shawn Marion. But I feel like any time during the span that they were like in the mix for the title, maybe not 08 and maybe not 09, but 2005, 6, 7, and 10, I think that they had a decent chance of winning it all any of those years. And probably the season where they had the best chance was 2005, because they still had Joe Johnson at that point, and he was really filling it up for them, getting around 18 points a game, as I recall. And they just had the most depth, I think, on that team before they traded him for Boris Diaw. All right, moving along, the next team I have on here is the Atlanta Hawks between 1985 and 1989. In each of these seasons, they won 50 games or more, and they actually never made it out of the 2nd round in any of these years, but I'd still consider them a title contender because they were the 3 or the 2 seed in each of these years, and even the 1 seed in one of these years. And the main reason they didn't win, you honestly just have to chalk it up to the Boston Celtics, who owned the East and owned the Hawks during this time frame, and they could not really do anything about that because they were just better. and the Hawks really only had Dominique as an elite level talent, and the rest were a good supporting cast, but you really needed more than just one all-star or one superstar to really do much against those Celtics. So they're just a team that was caught up in the wrong time, but maybe maybe if the Celtics wouldn't have had Kevin McHale or Larry Bird, they would have had a better shot. Or maybe if this Hawks team played it in the 90s instead of the 80s, but they probably would have still lost to Michael and the Bulls. But their best shot was in 85 to 86. They played the Celtics in the second round and had an epic duel of a series. And if they would have got past them, I think that they could have pretty easily gotten to the finals. Each of these years, Dominique was scoring between 28 and 30 points a game and dominating. 85 to 86 was his best statistical year of any of these years I'm talking about. But I think that 85 to 86 was when they would have had the best shot at winning a championship, for sure. All right, moving on. The next team I have on this list at number 8 is the Phoenix Suns, the second team to repeat if you count Oklahoma City and Seattle being the same team. The Phoenix Suns between 1988 and 1995. So between 88 and 95, they were around a 50-win team each of those years and a top 4 seed in the West, and they made it to the finals in 92 to 93. That's probably what I would define as their best chance to win it all. They were the 1 seed. They won 62 games that season. They were led by Charles Barkley and Dan Marley and Kevin Johnson, sort of as their big 3, with a good supporting cast of Tom Chambers and Cedric Ceballos. And they were even good before they got Barkley in 92, when Tom Chambers was more the leader of the team. They were still winning 50-plus games with him and Jeff Hornacek, and they were still impressive and a contender. But I think they were more a team that you expected to lose like in the second round or the Western Conference Finals, but you never expected to get over the hump. Charles Barkley coming to the team was really the thing that got them over the hump and made them a title contender. But they were still in the mix when they were without Charles Barkley, and they still had Jeff Hornacek before the trade for Barkley. And then after 1995, the next season they still did have Barkley, but they fell off talent-wise and were only the 8th seed in the West, and then Barkley left the season after. So at that point, they were washed up. But for those 7 years, I think that they were definitely in the mix, with the 1993 playoffs as being their best chance to win it all. The next team I have on here is the Portland Trail Blazers between 1989 and 93. This is one of the shorter windows on this list, along with the Kings from 2000 to 04. But between 89 and 93, the Trailblazers really were an elite team. They made the finals twice, actually. They won 60 games multiple times. They were always like a 1, 2, or 3 seed. And Clyde was in the heart of his prime, and they just had a really solid core. And I guess I would say that the 1992 playoffs was their best chance to win a title when they got to the finals and lost to the Bulls. They lost in 5 games, and I'm just putting this as their best year because it's hard for me to differentiate them having a better chance in this year or the year they played the Pistons 2 years prior. But I feel like the Pistons was a more well-rounded and complete team than this Bulls team in 92. So I'm going to say that 92, the Trailblazers would have had a better shot of winning. But yeah, after this, they sort of fell off a little bit and became a team that just lost in the first round perennially. But for those 4 years, I think that they had a legit shot to win the title any of those years. And the last team to round this out is one of the teams that had the longer windows of any of these, which would be the Los Angeles Clippers between 2011 and 2017. So in the 2012 playoffs, the Clippers got to the second round. 2013, they lost in the first round. 2014 and 15, they got to the second round. And then 2016 and 17, there were key injuries to Blake Griffin and Chris Paul, so they lost in the first round those years. But each of those years, they won 50-plus games, and they were like a 4 seed in the West. So they always had a chance. They were the 3 seed a few times also, and I think the 2 seed even once. They just always had a really good team, that Chris Paul and Blake Griffin were perennial all-stars during these years, and DeAndre Jordan was a great piece to also have. He also made an all-star team one of those years. and also just a good rotation of older vet players that were willing to contribute and be on the vets minimum to help on this team. Some of the big names that they had during this point. J.J. Redick was in the heart of his prime, so he was not a vet minimum guy, but he was a really big piece like DeAndre was. But other guys who came and just were kind of looking for rings were like Caron Butler, Matt Barnes, Paul Pierce, Grant Hill. I'm trying to think of some other guys. Glenn Big Baby Davis was on the team. Antoine Jameson, Chauncey Billups earlier on when this team was forming. Jamal Crawford was a really big contributor on this team, but he still had some game when he played for them. He wasn't a washed up vet, but the other guys were kind of like vets who were just giving it one last try for a championship, sort of like what you might think like Karl Malone on the Lakers. That's sort of what a lot of these vets were trying to do on the Clippers, like just give it their all one last time in hopes of getting a championship, but to no avail. They were a really talented team and just could not get over the hump of the Spurs or whoever it was at the time. It seemed like it was always, the conversation was always the Clippers and blank as the contenders. And every single time it was the other team that was the one going to the finals. The Clippers and the Spurs, but then the Spurs would go to the finals. The Clippers and the Thunder, but then the Thunder would go to the finals. The Clippers and the Warriors, but the Warriors were the team that was going to the finals. But it was never the Clippers beating any of those guys in the year that they could go on and eventually get to the finals. I'd say their best season was 2014-15. They beat the Spurs in the first round, the defending champs, and then they had Houston up 3-1. And I think if they would have won that series, they would have gone on and actually beaten the Warriors, who were still new at the whole being great and being dynastic thing. And it was just the Clippers were playing their best all-around ball that year. Blake Griffin had come in third place for the MVP voting, and that was probably his best season. And Chris Paul was still just rocking, doing great. DeAndre Jordan everyone was playing great. Redick and Crawford were doing good. And yeah, I liked this team a lot. I felt bad that they didn't win a title at some point during then, or even get to the finals, or even the Western Conference Finals. I think this is actually the only team on this list that I have that only made it. Oh no, the Hawks. Them and the Hawks are the two teams on this list that only made the second round, but were always just a perennial contender. And that's the whole list, guys. I hope that you found it interesting and that you learned something. And I think that my main point in making this video is just that I think that getting to the finals and losing is still an accomplishment to be able to get to the finals. Why else would they give the teams trophies for making it to the finals? Because they did win their conference, which is impressive. And I think that even getting to the Western Conference Finals is good because it means that in that season you are one of the best 4 teams in the NBA, which to me is impressive. Again, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you let me know what you think in the comments. If you agree or disagree with me, let me know. I'd be happy to hear from you. Have a good day, guys. Bye.